AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Alex Collmer. Alex is the founder and CEO at Vidmob. Alex, welcome to the show.
JP, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. So let's start with yourself, Alex. Would you give us a brief overview of your background, where you first got involved in tech, and sort of walk us through your journey, taking us up to the origins behind Vidmob?
Sure. Yeah. No, it's probably a good place to start. I think that what I would first start by saying is that one of the people, either fortunately or unfortunately, that was sort of born an entrepreneur. So I have an engineering degree from Cornell University. I was actually a structural engineer there. But actually, after my first 2 years, I took a leave of absence and ran a business on campus. My academic performance was, I guess, at least according to my parents, was sort of unimpressive. And so I left with a sort of direction of saving up the capital to then sort of pay my way through school thereafter. So basically from the age of, I think, 19, I started doing entrepreneurial things and frankly got pretty hooked on the whole experience. So then I went back, finished my engineering degree, but now, with the experience of sort of, paying my way through and having that responsibility, which definitely changed the direction of my academic career. And, I've been sort of addicted to it ever since. And I guess I started my first business when I was, I think, 23 or 24. Then later went on to help start a video game publisher called Autumn Games. And Vidmob is now sort of my second sort of legitimate company that I built from scratch.
I like it. So look, Vidmob is a very interesting organization. So I want you to take it from the top. Origins behind the idea for Vidmob and what the journey has been like so far.
Yeah, and it's an interesting story because I'd been sort of running the game business for a number of years. And, we'd made, big games with Def Jam and with Jimmy Johnson, the NASCAR champ. And we made sort of a fairly big fighting game property called Skullgirls, and sort of got to a point where I realized that this was probably somebody's dream job, but it just wasn't mine. And I was, frustrated by the games business for, frankly, a number of reasons. But one of them was it just wasn't as creative as I'd kind of hoped it was. And I felt like consumers basically just wanted sort of games with bigger guns or different kinds of ways to shoot people, and it just wasn't my thing. So I started thinking about what I could do that was going to be sort of more positively impactful in the world. And one of the things that was really interesting to me was what I saw as kind of like a web-wide shift from a static internet with text and images to one where video and more complex media types predominated. And having spent a number of years in the entertainment world, I just felt very strongly that technology certainly had to play a role in making the communications more efficient, more possible, more data informed, et cetera. But I didn't believe that it was going to be possible to make sort of pure tech solutions, like algorithmic editors that were all of a sudden going to make emotionally resonant video media. And so I felt like there was a chance that somebody would have a chance to build a platform that could make human creativity more scalable. And my view was, if I built that platform, then I could actually control the design of it so that the jobs that create it would actually be quality jobs. That we would do things to make sure that you couldn't just sort for the cheapest possible labor or things like that. It wouldn't set it up to have 100 people compete and then just pay one of them. And that was really interesting to me, this idea that at a time where AI and automation and globalization and all these sort of various, call it sort of negative labor forces, were conspiring to make just sort of basic work more difficult. We felt like creativity was an area that was going to be semi-insulated. And the idea of attempting to build a platform that would at least have the potential to create millions of quality jobs was something that was very compelling to me. And so in 2014, I started building this business.
I think it's a great origin story, because clearly you had an incredible role at Autumn Games, co-founder and CEO, and like you touched on, it was a role that many people would be very happy with, but you saw an opportunity inspired by your identification of a gap in the market and your own personal interest, and that's what sort of kicked off, like all great entrepreneurs, that's what's kicked off this journey. So you launched the business officially April of 2015. Can you sort of give us the current lay of the land in terms of the growth that you've had, the success, and give us a sense of just how successful the launch has been and where you're at currently as a business?
Yeah, and it's definitely evolved in the time since, from 2015 to today. So when we launched it, sort of right after launch, Apple named our app. It was actually mobile only in the beginning. So Apple named our app one of the best apps of the year, and we sort of assumed that that was sort of the pinnacle of success, and that everything was going to just come easily from there. And that just wasn't the case. I think that feature led to maybe a handful of thousand downloads of the app, but it certainly didn't jump revenues in any meaningful way. And so it took us about probably 6 months to realize that we needed to make a web version as well. So it'd be sort of multi-platform across mobile and web. And then by kind of the fall of 2016, we started working with Snapchat. They were really sort of our first big platform partner. And the use case there is probably worth touching on, just for the simple reason that it really sort of foreshadowed where the business was going to end up going. So in their case, they had just rolled out advertising on Snap. And at the time, they were really the only vertical format anywhere. And so as a result, no marketers had vertical ads. And so it was a barrier to revenue. And what they found was that when they turned to sort of traditional agencies to help remove that friction, it might take a few months and cost $100,000, a few $100,000, and probably be structured fairly similarly to a television ad. And when they were using our platform, they could get it in days for a handful of $1,000s, and actually have something that was kind of native to Snap. And so that ended up performing a lot better, and we became fairly close with them, and started quickly to actually drive fairly significant amounts of spending on the Snap platform. And so that led to a deepening of our partnership there, then led to sort of a similar relationship with Facebook and Instagram, and now today we've sort of become one of the preferred creative technology partners of really the whole kind of modern ad platform ecosystem. So Snap, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google, Amazon, Hulu, TikTok, Reddit, really across that whole spectrum.
You can probably say everyone once you've listed all them.
Yeah, and I think, yes, and they all have very similar problems. As a marketer, each of these platforms are different. They have different audiences. In many cases, they have different formats, and it's simply not possible to take sort of one or a small number of pieces of media and expect them to work across all those various channels. And we happen to have a certain expertise and understand how each of these platforms differ, and have built data systems, which I'm sure we'll touch on as part of this conversation, that enable us to sort of know with a degree of certainty how to kind of optimize each piece of content to perform on each of the different platforms.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you've done all of that. When people hear this, they're probably thinking it's several thousand staff. It's not. You've done this and just on a crack elite team, which I think, what your current headcount, right, is still around the 200, 250 mark?
Not even. Yeah. So we're, I believe right now we're at sort of 138.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's a relatively small company. Now,
doing big things, definitely.
Important point is, all of the creative work and all the sort of service work is sort of done out in the network, and essentially our kind of core operating model is essentially find sort of tangential human services, build software to make them, sort of more scalable and more data informed, and then push that out into like another ring in the network. And so in essence, what we're trying to do is build kind of like an operating system for creativity for marketers. And it's a way for the many, sort of human services that are required to make compelling, advertising media, to sort of all, transact essentially across a single software platform and just bring a great deal more efficiency and sort of intelligence through data systems to that process.
So that's a nice segue into the data services team. So can you give us some insight into what goes on behind the scenes? Because you're obviously the idea and the entrepreneur and the business leader, but I'm sure, in fact, I know from previous conversations, there's quite a lot of complex data science and engineering happening. Could you help us understand how you've pieced that all together and what it looks like currently on a day-to-day basis? What are some of the projects, and give us an example of the type of work that's being done?
Yeah, and it's actually really interesting because I think, there aren't that many companies or individuals that get a chance to actually sort of pioneer sort of an entirely new field of data. And that was the position that we found ourselves in, where when we got to, I guess, the end of around 2017, we found ourselves in this position where we were working really across all the platforms. We partnered and developed reasonably good relationships with essentially everyone, and we'd started integrating into all the various ads APIs originally, so that when our clients finished complicated projects, they could just, with sort of a single button, push all of their completed ad media out to the appropriate ad accounts. But when we did that, what also happened then as a result was we started getting back performance information on all of the ads that either we were creating or that our clients had sort of created elsewhere. And so it occurred to us that if we could actually build a means to actually understand the creative content, like the actual attributes and creative elements in each frame in each of those ads, that we could then sort of compare that to the corresponding performance information and do something interesting. And so this was right around the time where computer vision and optical character recognition, a number of these sort of ML-driven technologies were starting to get to the point where they were about ready to leap from static imagery to video. And so we built basically a number of sort of layered pipelines that we could sort of push large amounts of media through, run them through these ML technologies, and programmatically unpack all of the creative elements of that content. So, frame by frame, what words are on screen, what words are being spoken, how large is the text, what fonts are being used, which direction are the actors and actresses looking, what emotions are they exhibiting, where and when are logos and trademarks coming in, what objects are in the background and the foreground, and are those related or dissonant to what's being spoken about. All of those things are really just data points. And we built systems to kind of programmatically unpack each and every creative element in our client media. And then, we could take that very large creative element data set and compare it to the performance data set with everything from sort of upper funnel engagement metrics all the way down to sort of lower funnel, ROAS, purchases, et cetera. And start to come back to our clients, not with information on which ads are working, because everyone kind of knows that, but with information on why. Like, why was this ad working last week and it's not working this week? What's changed in culture that's led to that deterioration in performance? And then by connecting it back to our marketplace, give people a really simple way to sort of click on and act upon any insight and have new data-informed creative that's optimized and going to perform better back in my ad account like tomorrow. And so we basically created this category of data that we now call sort of creative intelligence. And in an industry that had kind of permanently separated creative and media, we built a software platform to bring these two things back together. And by bringing them back together, it made our data much more actionable. And in doing so, it became useful. Like if I tell you that your ad's not working because of X, Y, and Z, that information is actually worthless unless and until you do something with it. But once you use it to make a change and put that new better ad in your ad account and it now performs 50% better, well, now it's become valuable. And so for us, the whole thing was about not being a data company or a creative company, but being an and company, about bringing data and creativity together and making the data usable as a result.
So clearly, it's been an incredible journey over the past 5 years since you launched, and I think from conversations you and I have had previously, there's a lot more to do, and as people move to these platforms and redirect the advertising and marketing and creative spend towards a more digital first approach, you guys are primed to really be the main conduit to that. Can you give us some insight into, well, first of all, how you guys have pivoted during 2020 with all the challenges of COVID, but what that's now set you up for looking ahead to 2021?
Yeah, no. So I mean, last year was a really interesting year in so many ways. I think we went into the year and we had we were really excited about what we saw as the opportunity ahead, and then obviously in sort of late February and early March, just the sort of bottom fell out of the world, and there were a lot of discussions immediately about, all right, are we going to need to sort of retrench and sort of prepare to survive this, and ultimately we decided as a company that we were going to really focus on making sure that we, kept all of our employees, that we were really focused on doing whatever we could to, be as, employee and community friendly as we could be. We ended up opening up and making our platform, freely available to any sort of boutique agency or other, sort of in-house creative team that was struggling with the sort of remote stance. Because in a lot of ways, where the world moved to, sort of remote, collaborative, work, we'd sort of had already built a perfect platform for that. So what we quickly found was that, at least, in terms of our own operating model, it didn't really change anything, and we were, probably more productive than ever. It certainly, made the culture of the company change, and I think some to the benefit and probably more to the negative. But as our client set found that they were now accelerating in their transitions away from old systems to more software-based systems, we were very well positioned there, and we saw almost all of our relationships really kind of rocket forward, especially in the second half of last year. I think Q2 everyone was sort of figuring out just what was going to happen. Q3 was a little bit of that, but then things really started to come back as we got back into the second half of last year. And I think the general feeling now is, as we look into 2021 and see a world where the lights are going to come back on at some point this late spring, summer, and I think many of the changes that have come as a result of COVID, the acceleration of e-commerce, move towards more remote operating stances, many of those things are going to be permanent, and I think we're feeling very optimistic about how we're positioned for the future here.
Yeah, I think to add to that, with that level of growth, you're obviously going to need to continue to build a team, and it'd be great to get an insight from your level as you've built the business successfully over the past 5 years. I know you're still heavily involved with the screening and identifying of candidates. When you look at the technical side of the business, what are the key roles that are going to come up in the coming year, and what is it that you look for? Obviously tech stack is an essential part of it, but what else stands out to you and candidates listening to this who are interested in this space and see the potential of this of what this could be going forward? What should they be working on to give themselves the best chance of doing a good interview if they end up speaking to Vidmob?
It's a great question, and we're going to be doing a lot of hiring this year. So we actually just closed a $50 million Series C, and that included participation from companies like Adobe, who's probably the leading company in our space on both the sort of creative cloud side and the sort of marketing cloud side of things. As well as a number of other companies that participated, and then a number of really incredible funds as well. So as part of that, now we're going to be significantly expanding our engineering team, significantly expanding our data analytics and data science teams, and so it's a very relevant conversation. I think each of those are different, and there's a variety of roles that we're going to be hiring on the engineering side. But specifically as it relates to data, I think what we're looking for is, I would say, curious, people who can sort of see things in ways that that are sort of open to what is possible, as opposed to, to sort of what already exists, right? Because this field is entirely new, and we are, basically blazing the trail for what is possible and what can be done when you hook up, instead of building sort of human in the loop systems, actually build what we think of as sort of like services in the loop systems. So, if you think about like all the various human decision making that's happening as on top of our software, so that's either, editors and animators and motion designers, like generally creatives making decisions about how to make the best piece of creative. Each of those can drop signals down that our models can learn from. Then our data analysts, who are looking into the trends being surfaced in our platform, and trying to derive the most valuable insights for our clients about why things are behaving the way they are. Those signals then also need to drop down so we can understand what is a valuable insight, what's an insight that might be interesting but then doesn't actually drive impact. And so I think a big part of our focus for this year is sort of fully hooking up the circuitry so that each of these services become not just things that are enabled by, but they're actually inputs into our system and make our models faster. So when we're looking for people, we're looking for people that have sort of the experience and the horsepower to sort of think about these things and analyze them, and come up with novel approaches here, oftentimes with a wide variety of input data sources, but then also like people who are sort of comfortable in the unknown, and can think about what the world might look like once we create it.
It's great to hear about the way in which this is all played out, and you guys have been able to capitalize on a shifting industry, and it seems like that it's only going to continue to build momentum. The interesting thing for me is to have you on the show from the entrepreneurial leadership side, while also as somebody who's been able to build an incredibly impactful tech and data product. When you look back now, as somebody who didn't come from the traditional, PhD computer science, coding background, what advice could you offer to, people who may not have the technical, going to write an amazing line of code, but have ideas that are tech focused? Because it's a very interesting path that you've navigated quite well, and I'm sure there's a lot we could learn from it. So when you look back, what were the key things that sort of set you on your way, and what you would recommend for others to be mindful of?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think that like we live in a world now that really rewards people for specialization, and many of the educational institutions and frankly the career paths that open sort of push people down sort of fairly narrow specialties. And I think that is, there's obviously great value there. It's probably a less risky path, but I always saw a different path for myself, and I was really concerned anytime I felt like I was moving down a path that was going to sort of narrow the overall aperture of what I could do. And so my whole life, I was always just focused on learning as much as I could about everything I could. I read, voraciously from a young age. I was like, sort of raised to be incredibly curious. Both my parents are professors. My wife is a teacher. And so, when I graduated college, with my degree in structural engineering, I didn't pursue structural engineering because I felt like that was going to start to narrow me quickly. And instead, I went into I went and worked at a software consultancy, and was actually writing code for the first sort of year or so, and then sort of managing development teams. And I think over time, by just continually pursuing that, like how do I learn more about things I don't know about, and how do I get broader, I kind of got to a point where I was really never going to be the smartest person in any room as it related to any particular thing, but I had a fairly broad view across everything. And then when you sort of couple that with just a natural curiosity, I think I just tend to have ideas about things that I feel like could be done better. And because I have sort of a general system-wide understanding, I can think about, all right, well, what would the technology look like broadly, and how could I build this thing? And so for me, it's that sort of broad-based background that has enabled me to, I think, be a successful entrepreneur, and help then surround myself with incredible leaders who are frankly way more talented than me in all of the important disciplines. So we look at around our company, whether it's sort of business operations and business intelligence, or sales, or engineering, or data science, or client delivery, or really anything. We have just incredible people, and my job is really just to support them and give them the tools that and to some extent the sort of vision, direction that they need to be the best that they can be.
Alex, I think that's a great way to finish this. It's been a pleasure to speak with you and have you contribute to the podcast and talk to us about the incredible journey of Vidmob. It sounds like a very exciting time with lots of opportunity and people in our world of data science, engineering, analytics. This is quite a place. So I appreciate you sharing the journey, the advice for others looking back on how you've got to where you are, and we wish you all the best for 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's been fun being on, and great talking to you, JP. Thanks.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.